Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis. As always, here joined by my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. The Sunshine Double is now complete. Indian Wells and Miami. Aryna Sabalenka had the best result, men and women, out of both, you would say. Finaling Indian Wells, losing to Mira Andreeva, and then winning Miami. On the men's side, first title, not a bad first title to have. Jakub Mensik beats Novak Djokovic, of all people, to win his first title, also Masters 1000. And two tiebreakers, 7-6, 7-6. We'll get into it. But yeah, fun few weeks of both Sunshine Double.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of entertaining, enticing matches in Indian Wells. I'd say we had even more in Miami. It was a great tournament for the men and the women, and a lot of matches going right down to the wire. Yeah, the two combined were very enjoyable.
So why don't we start? This is Monday night, so we'll timestamp it for the listeners. It's Monday night. The final happened yesterday after a long delay with the rain, but last Monday, 7 days ago, you had Alex de Minaur playing João Fonseca in a match that Alex de Minaur was a total professional. Wins in 3 sets with the crowd strongly against him, but he didn't let it affect him. What an atmosphere that Monday night. My wife, who is not really a tennis fan, looked at me and said, "This is like a soccer match." And then I was communicating with you, and you're like, "It's the old home and home Davis Cup ties back in the day."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say I would look at it just slightly differently from you in the sense that I thought it was just a very pro Fonseca crowd. Not so much that I don't think they were antagonistic toward Alex. He felt some
Well said. No, thank you for clarifying that. Well
Yeah,
said.
but the point is the atmosphere was electric, and you didn't have to be in the stadium to appreciate that. You could feel it over the airwaves, and yeah, that was one of the highlights of the tournament. And somehow, De Minaur, you're right. The professionalism is the word. He came from a set down and squeezed out the second set and went on to win in three, and could easily have lost in straight because he was down break points at 3-all, 4-all second set. It could easily have been a straight set win for Fonseca. That match was won on experience and willpower from De Minaur,
A
and
hundred.
then he didn't have enough left to get by Berrettini after that. Understandably, because he put so much emotional energy into holding off this incredibly appealing and gifted kid in Fonseca. So it was almost had to have felt like a final to him in some ways because of what he put into it. But that was definitely one of the tournament highlights.
And we'll get into, Jacob Mensik as well. But I mean, the next gen, just from like a year ago, like just months ago, like that field is unbelievable with what they're doing right now. Another young woman on the WTA side, Alexandra Eala. You mentioned her last week a little bit. I mean, 19-year-old wild card. She beats Elena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and Iga Swiatek. She winds up losing to Jess Pegula in the semis. Unbelievable performance. We'll see where she goes as we now enter the clay season.
Yeah, she's left-handed. She's dynamic. Many people, including Pegula, they all making the comparison to Leylah Fernandez, who, of course, a former runner-up at the U.S. Open. And I like that comparison, except I think she's going to be even better and takes the ball so early. Pegula made some great comments about her after defeating Eala and said how she just sees the court so well and how she takes the ball so early. And then you find yourself in Pegula's shoes. It's not very big yet, and the second serve comes in sometimes at 70 miles an hour, but it's tricky to try to attack her. So everybody's trying to deal with that now. Iga was completely confounded by it. She was able to get her share of breaks, but then she couldn't hold her own serve. So, I mean, those were two great wins to beat Keys and to knock off Keys and Swiatek and then play so well against Pegula to make her work that hard across 3 sets. So, and it looked like Pegula, who would come back from 5-2 down and from set point down in the first set it was on the verge of winning. It was up 3-1 in the second set. And then again, 5-4, love 32 points from winning, but lost the set and had to really fight hard to close it out in 3. So this kid, and the great thing about Eala, she sat there. She didn't leave the court. So she wanted to soak in the applause more and see them applaud Pegula first and then left. She was still enjoying the moment, even though she lost the match.
Yeah, as she should. I mean, that was an
Yeah,
incredible week for her, as she should. Another match that was unbelievable, and I continue my theme with Grigor Dimitrov. I almost say like this late resurgence in his career, but it's been consistent for now several years. The match between him and Cerundolo on Wednesday night. Oh my God, 7-6 in the third. He saves a match. Grigor wins 7-6 in the third. He saves a match point down 5-6. Cerundolo missed a kind of routine return, a service return, but to see the effort, Steve, from both players. I mean, both players left everything out on the court. Grigor couldn't even walk off the court. He had his blood pressure checked. He had two medical professionals um,
yeah.
to help him
Well,
leave the court. I mean, it was incredible effort by both those guys.
oh, it was absolutely, and Grigor, the fortitude that he displayed was remarkable because he had 7 set points in the first set and shook that off, came back and won the second, and then battled hard in the third. And the match point you mentioned was a second serve, and the problem that Cerundolo had was he wasn't sure whether to take it on the forehand or the backhand. He probably could have moved around and really clocked a forehand, which is his best shot. He didn't, and he kind of got a bit timid on the backhand return to hit it in the net. And then Grigor wins in the tiebreak. And then, as you described, he was very wobbly, feeling very dizzy, and he had to get medical attention, have them take him off the court. But he did have a day off.
Yes.
For him, I think if he'd had to play Novak the next day, I don't know whether he could have done it. But with the day off, he was able to play. He didn't play.
Yeah, did you hear any reports? Did he do anything? Did anyone report anything that he did during his day off? Or I
No,
didn't hear anything.
I didn't hear. I don't know whether he was asked in the press conference. I read nothing about it. Saw
Yeah.
nothing about it. But it was nice that you could see that he was all right. Then, unfortunately for him, early in the match against Novak, he broke Novak in the opening game, and then Djokovic dominated from there, 1, 2, and 3. But after Novak had broken back, a fan was kind of harassing Dimitrov, and the umpire came down from the chair and went to security and had the fan removed after that game. After it was that was unfortunate. You could see Grigor was getting worked up. The umpire was afraid that Grigor might go into the stands after this guy, and that's not like him.
No.
But he was really annoyed. I don't know exactly what that fan was saying, but it was clearly irritating him to the hilt. And good for the umpire to get down there and make sure nothing terrible happened there. And then the fan was led away.
Right. So I wish Grigor, even though with the day off, he probably wasn't 100%. I would have loved to see 100% Grigor versus Novak. That being said, I think the result would have stayed the same. Novak owns Grigor pretty well, but you would have liked to see both guys top hilt playing against each other.
Yeah. Novak, the only loss he's had against us back in 2013. I just think it's not, obviously it's Novak's greatness and it's the matchup, and they both know it, and they're good friends, and Dimitrov was very complimentary afterwards. But look, he was in the finals last year. He had a lot of points to protect, and he managed to get back to the semis this year. So good for Grigor.
So good for Grigor. I can't believe how fit and how well he's still playing after his long career. And he there's no like clues that he's looking to slow down. So we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, I think he can stay at this level at least through this year and maybe next year. And obviously he has. I never liked the baby fed compare. I didn't like the baby fed label. I know he didn't either. I don't really think he, yes, one-handed backhand, but he never had Rogers' forehand. He has a very good forehand, but nothing close to Rogers' forehand, nothing close to Rogers' serve. That's no knock on Grigor, but he's just a very enjoyable player to watch in his own right. He's got so much style and grace out there, and he's so complete, and he volleys so well, and he's just a good guy on the court. I think all the players, if you had to vote for some of the most popular players off the court, he'd be very near the top of the list.
Agreed. All right, let's talk Taylor Fritz for a little bit. Interesting couple matches late in the week for him. He beats Berrettini on Thursday, 7-5 in the third set. Steve, he had 5 match points in the second set before Berrettini comes back, wins that set, and forces a third. I mean, kudos to Taylor for hanging in there and winning the third. A lot of players, after you have 5 match points, you don't get off the court. Now you're like, oh my God, another 45 minutes maybe at least against a player of the quality of Matteo Berrettini. That takes a lot of mental fortitude to gut that one out.
Yeah, no, listen, I think he carried it with him. I think he was composed and he's very professional. But I'm sure as he battled his way through the third set, it was still on his mind. But finally, he got the break at 5-0 in the third after Berrettini actually had a game point to hold. Would have made a big difference because the Berrettini would have at least been in a tiebreak there. But yeah, that was a great effort. And then, of course, the flip side is he escapes against Berrettini. And then when he's playing Mensik, wasn't quite so fortunate because Taylor, it went to a final set tiebreak. He had lost the first in a tiebreak, won the second, actually broke serve early in the second, won that. And then the third goes to a tiebreak, and he came from a mini breakdown to lead 4-3 and never won another point. At 4-3, I kind of liked his chances, thinking maybe, he can somehow squeeze one more off Mensik's serve and close it out, but he never won another point. But it was a terrific match, very well played match.
For Mensik to win a third set tiebreaker against Fritz, then he wins 2 against Novak, and we'll get to it. But I mean, he was 7 for 7.
David, let's not forget, he started his quest by beating Jack Draper, the Indian Wells champion, in 2 tiebreaks there. So
7 for 7 in tiebreaks this week.
And he's something like 30-13 now, I think, career tiebreaks. It'll be interesting to see if he turns out to be another Djokovic in the tiebreaks for different reasons, because for him, it's more about the serve and winning points off his serve. Although he did it the hard way in a number of cases against both Novak and Fritz, where he did lose points on his serve in those breakers, but would come back to break the other guy, to get a mini break back. So his poise under pressure this week was astounding.
Before we get to the final, I do want to talk about Saturday's final with the women being Aryna Sabalenka beating Jess Pegula 7-5, 6-2. This is the second big final they have. Previous one was the competitive one in New York, the U.S. Open. Again, we reiterate, I mean, an unbelievable 2 weeks for Sabalenka. She finals Indian Wells and she wins Miami. Steve, she just has, to me, she's just she's a level ahead of everybody else right now, in my opinion. Clearly she has the biggest game of everyone on the WTA tour. I think now, not just now, but the last few months, she's more consistent on her shots, and more importantly, mentally, she still gets very agitated and angry, but I think it's like the quick burst of anger, and then she lets it go. She doesn't carry it on to points and games and sets. You agree with that assessment?
Completely agree. And you think of as recently as just a couple of years ago when she lost the Open final to Coco, she was still quite emotional, and I don't want to say unhinged or be unfair, but the emotions would get the best of her at times, and she'd be the first to admit it. And then let's not forget that prior to that, she had all the issues with double faulting. There were stages where she could serve 25, 30 doubles in a match, and she was distraught about that. She got over that. She's the temperament, much more even-keeled now. And then you put that together with that explosive game, and now she doesn't worry. What I loved about this match was she misses a few. She can have a couple of bad misses here and there, some sitters off the forehand, and she just forgets about it quickly, comes right back at you. And Pegula commented on that too. It doesn't last. It's fleeting. Yeah. So this match, let's also remember, not only the Open in this match final in Cincinnati, Pegula had a play or two before the Open. So she's joking about how she doesn't want to see Sabalenka, the finals. I don't want to see you anymore, but in a nice way, because when the match was over, they had, I think, a tequila in the Tennis Channel desk for Sabalenka, and Pegula came uninvited and took the drink and I took a sip and then decided to take the drink with her, and Sabalenka was very amused, very good natured. You know what, David? That matchup, to get to the tennis, I feel like when I look at the Americans trying to stop Sabalenka, on given days, Keys can do it. She did it in the Australian final. On given days, no doubt about it, Coco's had a really good record against Sabalenka. I just feel like it's a bad matchup for Jess among all the top players, because she just, as much as she's improved her serve, especially her first serve, it's just impossible for her to keep holding. She can lose her serve 3-4 times a set against Sabalenka. So even though she might break her a couple of times, it's just not going to be enough.
Oh, and powerful, Steve. It's hard to hang in on rallies against her. She's just so powerful.
Oh, yeah, but she holds her own. She does well enough. It's just that she knows that going up a break may not amount to much, and getting down a break can be really dangerous. So I think she made those comments before the match. She talked about how difficult it is for her to play against Sabalenka, and it was borne out once more. On the other hand, She's in another final. She's still entrenched in the top 5 in the world. Pegula has had has won a tournament this year, so she's off. She's got a good start. I think she was very happy to make that final.
Yeah, great result. Great result. I just think
gave her all, but I just feel like, boy, if she plays Sabalenka 10 more times, I'd be very surprised. She might get a win and maximum 2 wins, but I can't see much more than that.
It's pretty. I have a couple things I want to say. It's pretty deflating sometimes when you're the opponent playing against someone like Sabalenka, because we say it on the men's side with the serve. Sometimes they take the racket out of your hands. And Sabalenka, she may not do that with her serve, but for her ground stroke, she's just so much more powerful than the other players that it's hard to hang in there in points. Sometimes you just don't have a chance. The other thing
David, I would say this. I actually think she has quite a good first serve, don't you? I mean,
yeah.
And yet that of course is one of Pegula's strengths, is she did return well and she got her share of breaks, but of course on her own serve she's just under assault every time she serves, and knows that if she misses the first serve, the second one is going to get demolished. So then what do you do on the first serve? Do you go for it or you take a little off it? She's got difficult choices to make throughout the match because Sabalenka is bearing down, and her return game is incredibly consistent.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about, we mentioned earlier, was about Sabalenka being more mentally strong. And I think from a coaching perspective, it's interesting because you can't treat everybody the same. Everybody is different. And you got a person like, I'll go back, age myself a little bit, Bjorn Borg, right? Never showed any emotion, right? You cannot make a person that is like Aryna Sabalenka and say, you can't show any emotion. You can't show any emotion to your opponent. She's not made that way. Novak talks about this real quick, right? He goes into maybe a negative state, but it's fleeting. He gets out of it very quickly. And that's the difference with what Sabalenka is doing now than as compared in the past, where she was not being able to come out of that state quickly. And she just let that drag. And I think as a coach, and when you look at certain players, you can't just try to make someone who they're not. You see who they are, and then you try to work with the skill set and help them as much as possible.
It's transformational. It's very impressive what she's done. I also like the fact that it was a devastating loss for her in a hard-fought, close 3-set match going right down to the wire with Keys in Australia, going for her 3rd title in a row. I think there was a sort of a hangover carryover effect, losing in the final of Indian Wells to Andreeva, who was a great player. No disgrace. So this was a tournament, I think, in her mind that Sabalenka needed badly, and she got it. And it will carry her into the clay court circuit with some confidence. And that intrigues me to see. She's played these great matches against Iga in the past, even on the clay. I would love to see them have some big battles in along the way to Roland Garros and then at Roland Garros again, because right now, I'm not sure she can't beat Iga even on the clay. I think it'll be very close.
It'll be close. Yeah, I think this year, if they match up, these coming months will be the closest that maybe it's been as opposed to previous years on clay. All right, let's go into the men's final. Long day for both players. It was supposed to be in the afternoon. It was rain, off and on. They finally get going at night. Novak has something with his eye. They didn't go into great detail on it, but you see it puffing up, during the day when he's hitting. I don't know. It was very humid. At one point, he was asking for sawdust. It was very, very humid out there. He was trying to find his way. He wasn't the sharpest of Novaks. I think we'd all agree with that. 7-6, 7-6. Mensik again, 7 for 7 in tiebreakers in Miami, taking a trick out of Novak's book, you could say. What are your thoughts on the final?
Yeah, no, you set it up well. The eye, by all reports, he didn't want to talk about it in the press conference, which I think was right, because as soon as you start down that road and start trying to explain it, you're going to be accused of making alibis. So he wisely just said, I don't really want to talk about that. But by all reports, it was a sty. I used to have a lot of problems with sties. I know what that's like, and it's not fun. And he put drops in it frequently at the changeover. Yeah. So not only was he dealing with the heavy perspiration, changing his shirt 10 times and needing sawdust for his hands, but he was also trying to get those drops into his eyes, and he wouldn't make any excuses afterwards. And it was not a dismal performance. No. He played decently, but he didn't play vintage Djokovic tennis. In turn, Mensik, who had lost to Novak in 3 sets in a very good quarter in Shanghai last fall. He was so poised. He talked about how nervous he'd been sitting around because, as you say, it was supposed to be afternoon. It was supposed to be a 3 o'clock start. They didn't. It was more than 5 hours late behind schedule. They had to finish off the women's doubles before them. So these guys, the nervous energy that they must have been burning. And somehow Mensik, as a 19-year-old, has never won a title yet. It was his second ATP final, and it's going for his first Masters 1000. And he was so good in the clutch in the tiebreaks. And then Novak was definitely, we've talked so often about this lockdown mode he gets into. He was the opposite of that last night.
He missed
it. It was uncharacteristic. Now, Mensik did say afterwards that he was determined to get every ball back, make every return in those breakers. And he was persistent. To his credit, he made very few errors. But Novak started to press, particularly in the second tiebreak. In the first one, he got down 5-0. He just dug a hole for himself, and Mensik played well, and then he held on to win it 7-4. In the second tiebreak, Novak made 5, what I would call them unforced, a couple of borderline, but 5 errors, certainly uncharacteristic errors, starting with 2 backhands into the net that started the breaker that put him down 2 love. And Mensik, again, managed to hold on despite the fact that on the first match point, he thought he'd won it.
Yeah.
And Novak's return hit the back of the baseline. And
back of the baseline.
That could have unnerved Mensik, but he comes right back with a great serve out wide in the deuce court to win the match. Very impressive. They each won 76 points in the match. They each won 77% of their first serve points. It was that close. But obviously, the dividing line, the determining factor was the breakers, where you would think Novak would win at least one of the 2, but that was not the case. And when he was asked afterwards about it, he feels it was the serve. Yes, it was partially that Mensik obviously can come up with those bombs at any time, but he also kept bouncing back because in the second set tiebreak, David, Novak, of the 4 points that he won, only 1 was on his own serve. He hit 1 service winner. It's the only point he won on his serve in the whole second, yet he won 3 on Mensik's serve. But it wasn't enough. He still lost it 7-4. So that's where I credit Mensik, is that he wasn't able to do it solely on the strength of his serve. He had to work hard off the ground, and he covered the court well, and it was a well-deserved win, and Novak was very sporting afterwards. Because the story, as you know, is that in 2022, Mensik was in the final of the Australian Open Juniors, and Novak had seen it, and through their agents, he arranged to have Mensik come train with him. And they trained then after the Australian. They trained again, I think, before Wimbledon. So Mensik knows him well through that experience. And you would think that might work against him playing. And he also had said that Djokovic was the reason he plays tennis. He idolized him as a kid. All of those factors, you say, how is he going to beat him in a big match? But he put it aside. So that tells me that it gives me great confidence in Mensik's future, that he could deal with circumstances like that. And we've been waiting for him to make a move. His ranking had gone down to, I believe, 54, now back into the top 25. So he's setting himself up for seedings at the majors and with a chance to climb. I say now, David, the end of the year, he'll be somewhere between 8 and 10 in the world.
Wow. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well he develops throughout the rest of the year. This was a big final for Novak too. Not only was it because it was a Masters 1000, one of the biggest tournaments of the year, especially outside the slams, but this was going for title 100. And Roger has 103 and Jimmy Connors has the record at 109. Novak's going to get 100. I'd be shocked. Everyone would be shocked if he doesn't get 100. But he wanted this one, Steve.
No, he did. And he talked about it. He's been open about it. When he won the Olympics, that was number 99. So obviously, at that point, he hopes to go to the U.S. Open and get 100 there. But he lost to Poprin at the Open in the 3rd round. And then he was in another final again in Shanghai, where he beat Mensik, where he beat Fritz. And he lost to Sinner in a well-played final. And then Australia, looked like it might happen in Australia. He's in the semis. He's beaten Carlos. He's surging. And then the injury, of course, he has to retire against Aryna. So he's been so close now on 3 occasions looking. So that's why I agree with you. It will happen. It will definitely happen. And, maybe, hopefully for him, it can happen on the clay court campaign coming up. Because even though he didn't take this title, which would have been an enormous lift for him, it's still a boost after losing his opening round matches in the previous 2 tournaments, including Indian Wells. So he gets a final. He's 5 in the world. Sinner doesn't play till May. So for the next bunch of tournaments, certainly prior to Italy, he'll be in that top 4 seedings, and that's going to help. And I think he'll get it. I think he's working hard, and the level of his tennis here was so much better than what we've seen from him anytime since Australia. So there are some encouraging signs for him.
Agreed. All right. Well, as we know, tennis never sleeps. Right now, we start the clay court season. The women are in Charleston, at least in the States, and the men are in Houston. So Sunshine Double's done, but next tournament, here we go. So it'll be interesting to see how the clay court season goes for a number of players for a variety of reasons. I'm excited for it. Steve, thank you for your time today, and get some warmer weather. It's still roller coaster, at least in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, David. Just to tack on, I'm looking forward to see. I mean, for instance, Carlos has had a tough time lately. I feel like we're going to see him reignited when he gets back on the clay, because he loves it. And of course, he won the French last year, and he had an abbreviated clay court campaign last year because of injuries. But he'll be excited, and Zverev still trying to kickstart his season, and Novak trying to get that title, and Mensik trying to live up to the glory of Miami. There'll be a lot of
And Fonseca on the clay. And
Fonseca on the clay. Yeah, he's going to do very well on the clay. He loves it too. So there'll be quite a bit of excitement starting with Monte Carlo, which I guess in a week.
Thanks so much, Steve. This was fun.
Thanks, David.